Peter Edwards and Edwina Currie. I'll see you after the headlines with Rhiannon Jones.
Mark, thank you. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. The Labour leader's accusing the Chancellor of gambling the mortgages and finances of the British people with what he calls casino economics. Sir Keir Starmer's echoed claims from the Institute of Fiscal Studies, saying Kwasi Kwarteng's mini-budget puts government debt on an unsustainable rising path, something Mr Kwarteng denies. Sir Keir says the government's fiscal plans won't work.
And after 12 long years of Tory failure, didn't they just show their true colours yesterday? Their driving ideology, make the rich richer and do nothing for working people. Well, this conference is our chance to set out the alternative, to make our case, an economy that works for working people, growth for everyone, everywhere, wherever they are, a fairer, greener future.
Well, Chris Philp, Chief Secretary to the Treasury, told us here at GB News the whole country will benefit.
I think the real gamble would be maintaining levels of tax that are inappropriately high, which risk deterring investment, which risk disincentivising hard work, and which risk driving individuals and companies out of the United Kingdom. By having competitive tax rates, we're encouraging people to work, encouraging them to invest, and encouraging people and businesses to locate here in the UK.
The Labour Party's pledged to create a national care service. It claims 13% of care homes need improvement. The party says private equity firms are failing in their duties to residents. Plans for the service include improvements in pay, workers' rights and training. Sir Keir arrived in Liverpool this afternoon and is expected to set out a number of key policies at the party's conference, which starts tomorrow. In other news, in Russia, more than 700 people have been arrested at protests across the country. They come after President Putin ordered the country's first military draft since World War II for the conflict in Ukraine. Footage from one protest shows Russian forces manhandling men and leading women to police vans. According to one rights monitoring group, there were protests in 32 cities from St. Petersburg to Siberia. We're getting our first look tonight at Queen Elizabeth II's final resting place in Windsor. The picture of the Black Ledger Stone has been released by Buckingham Palace. It's been set into the floor of the George VI Memorial Chapel, where the monarch was buried on Monday. The new stone's engraved in gold in memory of the Queen, her parents and her husband, the Duke of Edinburgh. It'll open to the public from next Thursday. TV online and DAB Plus Radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Mark Dolan tonight.
Welcome to Mark Dolan Tonight. In the news agenda with my panel, are tax cuts for the rich immoral? Does life start at 50? And is the name Gary cool again? Would you call your baby Gary? Reacting to those stories and many more are my brilliant panel tonight of former government minister, broadcaster and best-selling author Edwina Currie, former editor of Labour List, journalist and broadcaster Peter Edwards, and the political commentator and presenter Lynn May. My Mark Meets guest is the X Factor singer Katie Waissel, talking fame, fortune and working with Simon Cowell. In my take at 10, EU Commissioner Ursula von der Leyen says that there are tools available, that's right, tools available, if Italy elects the wrong kind of government this weekend. Thank God we're out. That's my take at 10 in the next hour. In the big question, top rock star Adam Levine from Maroon 5 is in trouble for flirting with women on social media. So we'll be asking, is flirting cheating? We'll speak to a representative of Christian Concern and an adult movie star. Plus, the Sunday papers, hot off the press at 10:30, and I want to hear from you throughout the show. mark@gbnews.uk. Now, this programme has a golden rule. It's a simple one, and we stick to it very strictly. We don't do boring. Not on my watch. I just won't have it. So there you go, folks. A very busy 2 hours to come. Big debates, big guests, and always big opinions. Let's start with this one. Following the reversal of the ban on fracking and the most significant budget in decades, with the largest tax cuts in 50 years, it's pretty clear that we've not just got a new Prime Minister and a new Chancellor, but a brand new government. It's almost like there's been a general election in which the public voted for change. It's now a race against time for Truss and Kwarteng, the bravest double act since the Wright brothers, the inventors of flight, for this bold plan to kick in and reap dividends. Let's hope their plane doesn't crash and burn. Not only is this the first Conservative government in years that looks and feels Conservative, it's the first government of any colour in as long as I can remember that actually believes in something. And that something is capitalism. It's always encouraging to have a policy that doesn't need a lot of explaining, a policy that is clear and unambiguous. The three words of "Get Brexit Done" swept the Tories to a landslide victory in 2019. "Go for growth" could do a similar job for Liz Truss in 2024 or earlier. Why should we always rely on the international bond markets and money printing to pay for our schools, our police and our hospitals? Why not pay for it out of national income? And that's what this push for growth is all about. This budget has been mischaracterised as trickle-down economics, an idea that dates back to the 80s and US President Ronald Reagan, in which you hand the wealthiest in society huge amounts of money and hope they'll spend it. Now, that's not what we witnessed yesterday. This is a push for growth on the supply side. In other words, to sow the seeds for the economy to grow and get bigger and stronger and to bear more fruit, to boost investment, the hiring of staff, to achieve pay rises for workers and to put more money into the pockets of every Brit so that they can go shopping. Now, why is that important? Well, because love it or hate it, 60% of our economy is based on consumption, buying stuff. Now, Labour have condemned this budget, but I'll be honest, I'm very confused because they were so critical of Rishi Sunak, the then Chancellor, when he announced the rise in national insurance. They said at the time it was a tax on jobs and an attack on hardworking Brits, which would disproportionately hurt the poorest. Well, they were right then, but it's been reversed. So what's changed? Crikey, I do hope that politics are not at play here. And as is too often the case these days, this government's unapologetically capitalist plan has been mischaracterised by those who want to see Britain maintain and keep going its crack cocaine addiction to tax and spend. Many are in uproar about the banker's bonus cap being scrapped, even though it didn't make a blind bit of difference, as high flyers just received more income through payroll instead. And Alistair Heath, writing in The Telegraph today, rightly points out that the 45% higher rate of tax was more performative, more political than anything else, given the pathetic amount of money it actually brings in. 40% is a much better headline figure because it encourages wealthy people to come to this country, stay in this country, invest and spend their cash here and pay their taxes here as well. Thanks to yesterday's budget, Britain now stands as a global beacon for enterprise and aspiration. And I believe in time Britain will be a model for the 21st century economy. Low tax, independent, simplified, innovative and dynamic, and an economy in which it works to pay, not sitting around all day watching Loose Women and Countdown. Margaret Thatcher transformed our economy in the 80s with low taxes and union reform, something it took the likes of the French and the Germans decades to catch up with. Well, this is another great leap forward, and let me tell you that post-Brexit, EU nations will never be able to compete with attractive, investable, low-tax Britain. EU nations are rooted in social democratic ideology, which involves big tax and big state. Critics of yesterday's budget have also chosen to exaggerate the scale of change. Even with the welcome tax cuts yesterday, which put money back into ordinary people's wallets, taxation levels are still astonishingly high, as pointed out yesterday by former chief Brexit negotiator Lord Frost, referencing a chart by the economist Matthew Leach. He writes, this chart is an important corrective to some of today's hysteria on the left. Today has seen a very welcome change in direction on fiscal policy, but we still have the highest tax burden for at least 40 years. That is why we have to get back to growth. Or how about this explainer, which has been doing the rounds, which puts the level of tax paid into perspective? Take a look at this. It's very interesting. A person on £20,000 pays £2,856. A person on £200,000 pays £85,178. 30 times more tax on only 10 times more income. A person on £1 million pays, wait for it, £435,000 in tax. That's 152 times more tax on 50 times more salary. The rich pay more. But this is my favourite tweet. It's from a young person making her way in the world. Take a look at this. Unpopular opinion. 100k salary is not the wealth you think it is. After tax, your take-home monthly is £5,457. If you're a man with a family of 4, with a wife who is yet to go back to work, with a mortgage of £2,000, no one can tell me that family is rich based on that alone. Who wrote that this week? One of the panellists on tonight's show, the political commentator Lynn May. You'll be hearing from Lynn, Peter Edwards and Edwina Currie shortly. So this should be the first step in the transformation of Britain. There's also, by the way, a deliberate misunderstanding of how tax works and how much people on different incomes actually pay. So let me clarify. How about this corker from this guy? And it's quite something, right? It demonstrates that in the end, taxes are still very high, and it literally is not a situation like we're in Dubai. Now, something that happened in the capitalist revolution under Margaret Thatcher in the 80s, and to be fair, we continued in the late 90s and early noughties by Tony Blair, was to keep taxes low. Don't forget, old Gordon Brown was the toast of the City of London, the banker's hero, but his successor, Keir Starmer, will undo all of that. His deputy, Angela Rayner, has already tweeted that Labour will likely reverse these tax cuts. But what would she and Sir Keir say to this voter who speaks for many? According to online calculators, yesterday's budget puts an extra £1,300 a year in my pocket. I'm just an ordinary working bloke. So why would the party that claims to represent the working man object to that? So there you have it. Vote Labour and vote for higher taxes. There is a sweet spot in taxation where it's high enough to fulfil the needs of the country in terms of public services, but not too high as to be a disincentive for people to take their business and money elsewhere. Before yesterday, we were well north of that sweet spot, with the highest tax burden since the 40s. Wealthy people paying less tax is not a good look, I'll grant you that. It's a gift to Labour. But Truss and Kwarteng are looking at the bigger picture. They want to grow the economy at all costs, no matter how unpopular and unphotogenic the policies are to make that happen. We should be focused upon the outcome, a bigger, more productive economy, rather than the means to get there. Because if the economy grows, we all win. And yesterday's budget taps into the potential of Brexit, because rooted in what was announced yesterday is the principle of economic and political freedom, something impossible if we were still in the bloc. Money's too tight to mention, but if you keep raising taxes, the graph stays simply red. For too long, sluggish, unproductive Britain has been holding back the years. But now a new flame has been lit. To carry on in a spiral of high tax and low growth is taking the mick. For those talking Britain down and criticising this ambitious budget that will deliver for all, I couldn't give a hucknall. If we go for growth, we'll be top of the pops. What's your view? Mark at GBNews.uk. I'll get to your emails very shortly, but reacting to my big opinion and all of the big stories of the day are my brilliant panel of former government minister, broadcaster and best-selling author Edwina Currie, political commentator and presenter Lynn May, and former editor of Labour List, journalist and broadcaster Peter Edwards. Peter, let me start with you. We're going to go for growth and it will lift everybody up.
Well, Mark, you could get a second job as a Treasury spokesman, I think, after that monologue. The mini-budget or full-scale budget has been called by many people a gamble. It's not a gamble at all. There's a certainty. There's a certainty that if you're in the poorer 50% of society, you'll be worse off because of inflation, and it's a certainty that if you're in the elite, you'll be better off because of the abolition of the top rate of tax. There are numerous stats that have been bandied about in the last 24 hours about why this has been an unfair budget, and I'm sure we'll kind of go into more detail, but it is not progressive. It has borrowed more money, £45 billion extra, nearly £200 billion this year, to give money to the highest earners in society. You made a point about growing the economy that was a Liz Truss point, the theory that if the cake gets bigger, everyone benefits. That's not true when inflation is at 10%, because if you grow the cake by a smaller amount, everyone else is left with a few morsels. Inflation at 10% kills off these gains. Poorer people are worse off. It's not just my view. Independent forecasters have said the same. It's not a gamble, it's a certainty. And my advice to the Labour Party would be campaign on that, but don't campaign on phrases like trickle-down economics, because that's too oblique for the doorstep. It's a simple question. Are you better off than you were 5 years ago?
Peter Edwards, it's misleading to quote 10% inflation because the government's rather socialist support for the whole country in paying our energy bills this winter is expected to halve inflation to around 5%. And the bottom line is that, yes, there is the risk of inflation, but do you not want economic growth?
So, Mark, it's not misleading because inflation isn't 5%. It's between 9 and 10% today, depending on which of the indices you look at. My point, of course, everyone wants growth, but it's how you cut the cake. And the cake was cut in a very selective and divisive manner yesterday, with the bottom 50% of people getting much less to eat. That may be literally, rather than just metaphor, this winter.
Well, look, let's have a look at some of the numbers involved, Peter, because let's take the example of somebody that makes £1 million a year. They will pay, based upon yesterday's budget, around £435,000 in tax. So it's almost £500,000 that they will send to the Treasury every year that they make £1 million. Surely that's enough.
That is a very interesting argument because lots of other Conservative Prime Ministers have not taken this step. Now, obviously, Labour are against it today, and Labour have got a tricky balancing act. Do they go into general election calling for a tax rise, even if it's at the top rate only? But the idea that this is somehow a lightning flash of genius to boost GDP doesn't stack up when we've had so many, quite a large number of recent Tory Prime Ministers, even more Chancellors, who've not done that. So, to me, is it patriotic? No. Is it Conservative policy or Conservative value? I don't think so. Is it the actions of an ideological maverick? Yes.
However, Peter, and I'll come to my other panellists shortly, but wouldn't you like more people, that lucky lady or gentleman that makes £1 million a year, wouldn't you like more of those people in the UK, not fewer, given the fact that they write a cheque for £435 every single year? So yes. £435,000 every year.
Yes, but the founding principle, or one of the founding
principles... They won't
principles...
come if taxes are high, Peter.
Well, why can't people here already, regardless of nationality, achieve better living standards? Rather than importing an elite from other countries to work in the city, why can't we make people here already, regardless of nationality, better off? And we're talking about the elites, but remember, this winter, 38% of people are still in fuel poverty.
Of course, there are major problems. Final thought before I get to the others, Peter, and it's in regards to, again, the sort of tax structure. It's accepted by most economists that not only will the government's support for our energy bills reduce inflation to about 5%, which we can all get behind that policy. It's the right thing to do. It's also expected that this tax cut will create a shorter and shallower recession. So what would you rather have, a deeper, longer recession or lower taxes?
Well, I don't think there are many people against the energy price cap. It's a Labour idea that was taken belatedly by the Conservatives. But do remember the words of Robert Choate, who was the first chair of the independent forecaster called the OBR, which is all predictions are wrong.
Oh, well, indeed, but you haven't answered my question, which is, would you like a deeper, longer recession or lower taxes and a shorter, quicker recession and less profound?
Well, I think you're winding me up because... we're already in recession now. The Chancellor of the Exchequer admitted that yesterday. We are where we are. We've got what I would see as regressive income tax changes and a small handout to help us all with energy prices. We're going to have to see what happens over the winter.
I just need to answer the question. Do you want a short, shallow recession or a long, deep one? Because if we cut taxes, we'll have a short, shallow one.
It's a false dichotomy.
Well, it's a choice, but it's a tough one to make. Of course, many people, and including millions of people in this country, will agree with Peter Edwards and feel that it's been a bad budget for those at the very bottom end of the economic ladder. I've had really angry emails from lots of viewers saying, what has happened to this government? They're not supporting the poorest in our society. So what's your view? Mark at gbnews.uk. Lynn May, what's your view on this budget and the race to grow?
Well, a question I'd have for Peter is, you know, there's this misconception that the largest in society are the poorest, but the last survey highlighted that the biggest at the moment and the most to emerge is the middle class, as it were, or those who wish to be the middle class. There's so many people now that are extremely ambitious. And when you look at stamp duty, I spoke to many people since the mini budget was released, and they're ecstatic that they now will not have to pay loads of money towards stamp duty. So this whole misconception, it's only for the 1%, it's only for the few. No, many of us are going to benefit. Even myself will benefit because of the repeal of the IR35 legislation, which, you know, was awful for many of us contractors. So I don't think this is only for the few. So why do people keep on saying this, like yourself, Peter?
Earlier in the show, during my Big Opinion monologue, I actually quoted you from Twitter today, Lynn, and you said that if you make £100, you're doing very well in life and you can be very grateful, absolutely, but that you're not rich, given the fact that you might take home about £5,000 after tax. If you've got a £2,000 mortgage, you are not rich. What motivated that tweet?
Because I see loads of people suggest, you know, as I said just a minute ago, that it's for the few, it's for the extremely wealthy. But I think we need to have a discussion about what is we see or what we deem to be extremely wealthy or the rich. Because, as I said, it sounds like it's a lot of money, but if you are, let's say, a man supporting a family of four with young children, wife hasn't gone back to work, and you live in London or the surrounding areas, 100,000 isn't that much. So, you know, people often think that so many people, even above 50,000, is the super wealthy, and it's not the case.
Millions of people in this country, Edwina Curry, will agree with Peter Edwards that the optics of this budget are that it's basically for the super rich.
Well, you mentioned earlier that we had a lot of tax cutting in Margaret Thatcher's day. There were three main tax-cutting budgets, and that's absolutely right. And I was in the government at that time. And I remember 364 economists saying, oh, the terrible, dire things, that everything's going to collapse and all the rest. A load of, you know what, small balls. It was rubbish, and it turned out to be rubbish. Now, my hope is that the same will be the case for this particular mini-budget, or maxi-budget, indeed. I think it's worth remembering that whichever way you cut the figures, the fact is that when you add income tax together with national insurance, you still have a higher than 50% marginal rate on a lot of incomes, and that includes those of the people who might regard it as well off, as being very well paid. And that means that there is really still quite a strong disincentive to earning more money, to doing a better job, to going for promotion, to heading to be a top professor or, you know, head of the BBC or something like that, because most of that money is going to go back to the government. I agree with the point that's being made by our new Prime Minister and our new Chancellor. I think we have an obsession with equality in this country. I'm all for equality in the law. It seems to me absolutely essential that everybody is treated the same, treated fairly, and has the same opportunities. But when it comes to what you earn, that should be based on your aptitude and your effort, because that kind of inequality is what brings somebody like me from a very ordinary, very poor background in Liverpool to make the effort to go to college when everyone said, why bother, you could go and get a job, to make the effort from college then to go into all sorts of rather better paid jobs. So I never earned very much until I started writing books. But that kind of incentive is a big help. It actually encourages people to head for being better off than their parents, better off than their grandparents. We shouldn't decry it. And if there is a conflict, and you tried to get Peter to answer this and he wouldn't do it, but if there is a conflict between growth and equality, I would go for growth, because I really do think that benefits everybody. In Margaret Thatcher's day, we had much higher inflation, We had much higher interest rates. And in the years afterwards, particularly as we come towards the Blair government, they were able to benefit from those enormous changes. My fear is that this budget comes a bit too close to the next election, that it won't have had time to work through before the election comes. And what's really bad for inward investment, what's really bad for business confidence, is if we have constant chopping and changing. Margaret Thatcher was able to take advantage of the fact that she had 13 years. The two who are in power have got not much more than about 13 months. Let's hope it works.
Well, let's hope it works indeed. It's interesting, Edwina Curry raises a fascinating question. What's more important, equality or growth? What's your view? Mark at GBNews.uk. Coming up later in the hour in the news agenda with my panel, are tax cuts for the rich immoral? My Mark Meets guest is X Factor star Katie Waissel, and we've got my take at 10 as well, in which I'll be dealing with Ursula von der Leyen, who wants to try to reverse election results in Europe. You won't believe that story. That's live at 10. But next, in the big question, is flirting cheating? See you in 2.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio
and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's
news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness, brilliant.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Well, a big response to my big opinion monologue. I think this government are right to go for growth. I think it's a gamble, but what choice do we have at this time of economic crisis? I'm sick of international bond markets paying for our police, our hospitals and our schools. Why are we always printing money? Why can't we have national income that pays for these things? So I support the policy and I think it's a gamble worth taking. But what do you think? Mark at gbnews.uk. Mark says, Steve, the rich don't pay tax. They avoid it by going offshore. Dan says, good evening, Mark. Good monologue, sir. Here's a little fact that Labour and the poor always forget. Employees do not get richer by making employers poorer. With regards to Labour saying there's nothing for the working people, there's a penny off the basic rate and the national insurance rise has gone back to where it was in March. Doesn't sound like nothing to me. Still need the higher interest rates, though, to try and keep up with the Fed. But if we're on par with the EU, then not at all a major disadvantage. Well, you're right to mention the EU, Dan, because the euro is performing just as badly against the dollar as the pound. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. I'll be dealing with the EU later in my take at 10, by the way. But a couple more emails before we get to our big question. Chris, broken record about Thatcher, yet this is 12 years of Tories and we are in this state. How would Maggie feel about that? 12 years, too long to do the usual blaming the previous incumbents. So, Chris, you're absolutely right. We've had 12 years of Tory rule, but has it really been a Conservative government is the question. Colin, please tell Peter Edwards, your contributor, that the Tories have restored the same higher tax rate that Labour had in the 2000s, 40%. Ironically, the Tories taxed the high earners more than the last Labour government. And last but not least, Fred says, Mark, the fact is all of the Western world is heading for a big shock, mostly caused by incompetent, unpatriotic, greedy, so-called politicians. Fred, thank you for that. Keep those opinions coming. Mark at gbnews.uk. It's time now for this. It's time now for the big question in which we tackle a major news story of the day. Tonight, top rock star Adam Levine from Maroon 5 is in trouble for allegedly flirting with women on social media. His marriage is now under pressure. So it begs the question, is flirting cheating? To debate this, I'm delighted to welcome adult film star Brooklyn Blue, Tim Dieppe, the head of public policy at Christian Concern, Andrew Krapalshet, the CEO and founder of Red Balloon, which combats cancel culture in the American workplace, and former government minister Edwina Currie, who's part of my panel tonight. Let me start with you, if I can. Andrew, do you think that flirting is cheating?
Absolutely, it can be. How about that for an uncertain answer? But, you know, my question is, why would you turn on the oven if you're not planning on cooking, in my opinion, right? We want people who are thinking about what they're doing. And when you're spending all your time at work flirting with the opposite sex because you think that that is fun, you are going to have consequences from that. I have managed hundreds and hundreds of people over the years, and every time someone messes up their family in the workplace, I see significant consequences at work with their performance, with their productivity. And when you wreck your family, it wrecks your productivity at work, so you should not do it, and I think it's wrong.
However, Andrew Krapalshet, don't you think that this is just sort of recreational? It's just fun. It's quite social, isn't it? Sort of maybe having a little flirty text session with someone on social media. It's not like you're making love to them.
Well, you know what the Bible says, and I know you're probably not allowed to say that word, the B word, on national television, the Bible. But when Jesus says if you have lust for a woman in your heart, you are committing adultery with them. I also talked to a lawyer who's helping with marriages right now just last week, and he said a lot of the big multi-million-dollar divorce cases started with flirting at work and flirting in other scenarios. So you need to understand there are significant dollar consequences for this type of behavior. So whether you think it's wrong or not, you should look at your checkbook, decide if you want to split it in half, and share it with the person that you're currently married to, because you are cheating with them in lots of other categories, even if not in the bedroom.
You've had a lot of success as the CEO and founder of Red Balloon, which combats cancel culture in the American workplace. We know that workplaces are getting more woke, but also, is there a lot of flirting going on in offices?
Well, here's funny. So I have, again, managed hundreds and hundreds of employees. I've had a number of employees that have met at work, gotten married, have lots of kids. They're very, very happy. And I encourage that type of behavior. Now, I do encourage them to take that outside of work, because flirting in the workplace, it just causes tension. It can cause office politics. Because if everyone's spending their time trying to figure out what the person of the opposite sex thinks of them, they're not thinking about their job. And I'd like people to think about their job when they're working for me, because, in fact, there's a one-to-one correlation between me paying them and them doing good things for my company. And so that's why I've told people, look, if you want to go out on a date with somebody that is at work, do it after work. Don't waste my time with your flirty stuff at the office. So that's if you're not married. If you are married, just knock it off. It is a bad precedent. And guess what? I bet that person is going to meet your wife someday, and you're going to find yourself in the doghouse, and nobody wants to be in the doghouse.
Knock it off and knock one off instead. Tim Dieppe, you're the head of public policy at Christian Concern, and I would have thought that you stand for family values and you would consider adultery to be a sin. Doesn't flirting prevent adultery because you get to fantasize about this other person without going further. Isn't that what flirting is?
No, the opposite is the case. Actually, as Jesus said, and Andrew just quoted it, it's one thing to
A lot of
commit
Jesus
adultery.
tonight.
He did, yeah. And then he said, but if you look at a woman lustfully, you've committed adultery in your heart. So Jesus is saying there's such a thing as adultery in the heart. So there's actual adultery and there's adultery in the heart. And if that's an actual thing, adultery in the heart, then that's a serious thing. That's something you've done really wrong. And that clearly is cheating. And he went on to say, it's better to tear your eye out than to lose a member of your body and end up in hell. Right? So he's saying that is that serious. It really damages your soul, right? It's something that you need to take very, very seriously. It's one thing because it's actually damaging your relationship with your wife. It's another thing because it's damaging your soul and your relationship with God. And so this is not something to mess about with. It's not something to play around with. It's serious stuff with ultimately eternal consequences.
Brooklyn Blue, you're a very successful and in-demand adult film star. You make a lot of money. You've got a huge audience for your work. What is your thought on flirting?
I mean, if you're taking the time to actually message somebody and do that flirting, the way I see it is there an intention behind that? So if they're actually taking the time to go and message someone and say, oh, you're really hot or something like that, there's a line. I mean, are they just fantasizing or are they intending to go further with that and then take it to the next level? And obviously I wouldn't be happy if my husband was messaging people like that, I can tell you that. But then people can go to an extreme with it. I mean, some women sit there and say, if somebody's liked someone's photo on Instagram, it's technically they want to be with that other person. No, I mean that's ridiculous to me. I mean, but if you've actually taken the time to personally message somebody, I would see it as there is an intention behind that. And I would see it more of a reason of, well, is there a problem at home? Because if you are happy in your own relationship at home, I don't feel like you would need to reach out to somebody else. I feel like you'd only do that if you weren't satisfied at home with your partner. So I think it's more that, and they need to work on their own problems rather than take an easy way out and go take an easy way out and message anyone else who can be up for a little bit of fun. I think it's more a case of, no, go and get, a couples counsellor and work on your relationship and your problems, because I think that's where it stems from. And I do think that is the majority of people having affairs is a problem in your own relationship, whether one of you is not happy or whatever. But I do think if you've taken the time to message somebody, there may be an intention there of taking it further, or as why would you do it in the first place? Because you'd have respect for your partner in the first place to not message that person if you're happy at home.
Brooklyn, I'm curious about where banter stops and where flirting starts. I mean, you're at home at the moment. What would happen if I said, that's a nice kitchen, you've got lovely taps?
I would obviously make a joke back about that. I mean, I don't think my taps are not that great, so but I mean,
not what I've heard.
Obviously, it's a jokey thing. It's a laugh, like there is banter, and of course you can have a bit of banter, but there is a line you can cross with that, and and you've got to know the morals and sort of the morals and the boundaries between that, and just having respect for your partner. I think it all boils down to that. And I think if you are happy in that, you're not going to look elsewhere, or even you'd know when to stop, or it wouldn't even come into your mind to go any further, or you'd want to go any further if you're happy.
Edwina, life would be miserable without a bit of flirtation, wouldn't it?
Well, I must say hats off to Brooklyn. I'm very glad indeed that I've never had to earn a living by taking my clothes off. And actually, I think the rest of you are very glad about that as well. Flirting can be fun. Flirting can, especially in the older generations where flirting was widespread, it's a way of paying a compliment and actually making somebody's day. It can make you feel good. If somebody says to you, "You're looking really nice today," and then the response to that should be, "Thank you." And maybe if you're kind, you look at him and say, "You look nice too." And it may well be that you mean absolutely nothing by it. When people take it as an insult these days, there's a whole generation that doesn't understand why it's an insult to say to somebody, "You look nice today." You've obviously taken some care and effort. You look You look smart. You look good. To me, that's what flirting is. To go a bit further, as it is, what's his name? Adam Levine. I'd never heard of him before. To go further and start putting really quite suggestive texts out, I would say this. If you really want to just flirt, don't leave a trail, right? Don't write a letter, don't write a text, don't put something out where it can be repeated, printed off, and it can be used against you, especially if the relationship turns a bit sour. If you want to keep a secret, don't tell anybody. I'm an expert on that.
Well, too right. Look, Edwina, I could pay you many compliments. You chose the wrong night to wear a pearl necklace, but you are, of course, a very admired person. You've written best-selling books that contain love scenes. And you were in Parliament. Parliament, of course, is a hotbed of sex. And you served under Margaret Thatcher, didn't you? Margaret Thatcher herself was a well-known flirt.
Oh, yes. And watching Margaret flirting sometimes with some of the quite senior men, it was really an eyeful. She did actually believe in crossing her legs and batting her eyelids. But behind her sometimes would be somebody like Alan Clark, who found her extremely attractive and said so in his diaries. And you could see him sort of breathing hard. Now, that would keep the rest of us entertained. We were probably listening to the budget or whatever else we were actually supposed to be there for. But yes, the atmosphere in Parliament 30, 40 years ago could be quite exciting.
Do you flirt, Edwina?
There are moments when I think about it, and then I look at somebody like you, Mark, and I think, do you know what? I'm old enough to be a mother. I better not.
Listen, let me tell you, I'm trapped in a loveless marriage. All bets are off, Edwina, and I'll see you after the show. Let me come back, if I can, to Tim Dieppe from the Christian Concern organisation. What is permissible in terms of an interaction with the opposite gender?
Yeah, I think it depends a bit on the relationship and how you know them and so on. I'd be fine with saying you look great today to somebody I know well who would understand that that's just a general compliment. That's not flirting. That's just complimenting someone. I'm fine with that. And I think we know where the line is. The line is about lustful intent, isn't it? The line is about engaging lustful thoughts in your mind. And that's where the line is crossed here. And that's where it's kind of crossing a line. In fact, Adam Levine said, I crossed a line, and he regrets it, and he knows he made a great mistake, and he knows he's damaged relationships in what he did in terms of his flirtatious text messages. He clearly crossed a line. There are clearly lines to be crossed here. Yes, let's have fun, entertaining, witty interactions between men and women, fine. Let's compliment each other, fine. But when it goes into lustful intent, and when it goes into something that you'd rather didn't go public, let's not do that at all. Whether it's, not doing it on text because it might get caught. Let's not do anything that might not get caught either. If it's something we'd regret, something we'd be embarrassed about with our wives or with our spouse or whoever, let's just not do that.
Andrew Krapachet, it's interesting, isn't it? The US streaming giant Netflix has apparently got a directive for the crews that do filming on their TV shows and their movies that you cannot make eye contact with someone of the opposite gender for more than 2 seconds because that would be considered harassment. But eye contact is very much part of flirting, isn't it? Catching a colleague's eye or somebody on the train.
Well, I think a lot of it comes down to, as others have said, what are you trying to accomplish? So if I tell you that I have a little bit of hair envy because you have a luscious head of hair, that doesn't mean I'm flirting with you. It just means I'm giving you a compliment. And I think people know far more than they admit what they're trying to accomplish. And we try and, in a workplace, we try and keep people out of situations where maybe they're going to compromise, because flirting generally goes somewhere. Real flirting, right? Compliments are one thing, but when you're flirting with intent, that is the problem. And so we'd say, look, if there's two people of opposite sex, they can't go take a business trip together, because if you are spending multiple days together, going back to the hotel together, you are just setting yourself up for a problem. And you are even putting yourself in a position where you can't be above reproach, right? What if the female later in the Me Too movement says, oh, he did this? Well, now you have no defense against that. And so Netflix obviously is being ridiculous because because I have looked someone in the eyes for more than 2 seconds without flirting. In fact, I'm doing it right now, and it's worked out just fine. So you just need to define, what do you mean by flirting? Are you being ridiculous with your rules? And you need to check the heart, right? What is your intent? Where are you going with this? And I think we all know, whether we want to admit it or not.
Brooklyn Blue, the clock's against us, so briefly, is there much flirting on set in an adult movie?
Well, I'm going to totally ruin the fantasy of porn here, but not really. I mean, everyone kind of turns up and wants to get the job done and get home. Like
sounds like GBNews
in the world. But I mean, fair play to Margaret Thatcher. She sounds like she was a very clever woman and used her femininity to get what she wanted in Parliament, I tell you. But I mean, there isn't really. I mean, obviously we act it in the scenes and it's written into scripts and stuff like that to make, obviously, the scene look good. But in reality, we're all just there, you know, talking about the most boring, mundane things that everyone talks about in the office and, you know, can't wait to get home. So, yeah, I make it sound really terrible, but it is a normal job and that's how it is. But
Brilliant.
Other than that, I mean, obviously, messaging someone and things like that, it depends on what's being said, what's being done, and the intentions behind it all. I mean, obviously, giving someone a compliment, saying you look nice, or this, that, and the other, I mean, absolutely no problem with that. I think more people should do that. Everyone should, you know, make someone's day by just saying something nice to a total stranger.
Well, too right. And Andrew Crapuchet, you are luscious as well. In fact, you look very rugged. You look very rugged indeed, and maybe I should just go for the full number one on my hair as well. My sincere thanks to Andrew Crapuchet, the CEO and founder of Red Balloon, which combats cancel culture in the American workplace. Also, my sincere thanks to Tim Dieppe from Christian Concern, Brooklyn Blue, who is an adult film star and a good friend of the show, and, of course, Edwina Curry, who's part of my panel tonight. Lots more to get through, let me tell you. In my Take at 10, the EU seems to have given up democracy altogether. Find out why at the top of the next hour. Plus, does life start at 50? And is the name Gary back? Would you name your baby Gary? And the Queen of US Royal reporting, Kinsey Schofield, live from Hollywood, reacting to a shocking new book with more revelations about, you guessed it, Meghan Markle. Plus, a surprise US honour for rock superstar Elton John. But next, in the news agenda with my panel, are tax cuts for the rich immoral? See you in 2.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV.
On radio,
And online.
we're proud to be
the People's Channel.
Britain's
News channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know. The latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
A big response to our debate around flirting. Is flirting cheating? This from Peter. My rule in business, says Peter, has always been thou shalt not stick thy rod up thy staff. How poetic. Shakespeare lives. I'll get to more of your emails shortly, but we must get to our fascinating news agenda topic because Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng's mini budget abolished the 45p top rate of income tax for people who earn more than £150,000 a year. According to Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs, that is a tax break for just 629,000 lucky people. Can it be moral that such a small group of people are paying less tax when many others are struggling with energy bills and the cost of living crisis? It begs the question, are tax cuts for the rich immoral? Lynn May.
Oh, I don't know about immoral, because as I said before when I was on here with you, what do we deem as immoral? How do we quantify morality? However, the perception of it would be seen as it's not right to many, for the simple fact it's about quality of life. And if you don't have those tax breaks for the people on lower wages, their quality of life is already probably scuppered. So that's why people would say that the cuts for the higher earners would be immoral. So, personally, I wouldn't say it's immoral, no. But I can see why the perception would be deemed as immoral.
I think we're conflating two things, aren't we? We're conflating the actual amount of tax paid and the proportion of income. And those earning over £150,000 will pay a smaller proportion of their income, but a larger sum. Still a lot of money.
Yeah, but it goes back to me saying about their quality of life. If they pay even a bit more tax, and I'm not encouraging them to do that, but if they had to, would their quality of life really fall? Whereas even a tiny bit more for the people on lower wages, their quality of life would drop considerably. £5 to someone on, I don't know, let's say 18,000 a year is a lot of money where it's not for a higher earner.
But, Edwina, taxing the rich, it's the great imponderable of politics, isn't it? It just doesn't work.
Well, look, we cut the tax on the lowest paid by an enormous amount quite recently. We cut income tax, so they pay no income tax below 12.5 grand on the first 12.5 grand of income. And we also recently cut the national insurance as well. So people on £1,000 a month are not paying any tax at all. That's already been done. You can't cut taxes if you're not taxing anybody.
But Edwina, you're very experienced. You know what fiscal drag is. I think you're being very selective. Fiscal drag, as I'm sure you can explain in one sentence, is a personal allowances. Everyone's going to be worse off this week because of inflation. The personal allowances haven't gone up in line with inflation.
Peter, you're being a fiscal drag tonight. Bottom line,
first of all,
taxing rich people doesn't work, does it?
First of all, you're muscling in on my time. All right.
Don't interrupt the current
discussion.
Secondly, look, that is a huge difference because until recently, at £8,500, you started paying national insurance. Most of the time when I've earned that kind of money, I've been paying tax, and now it's not happening. And that particularly helps the people everyone always forgets, which is pensioners. Because that's basically your state pension and perhaps a small works pension you've got on top of it, and you're not paying any tax on it. And that is wonderful. It's a really, really big help. The encouragement has to be to get people into the higher rates, into the higher incomes. And then, yes. And I tell you what happens when you start paying tax. You start to think about where the money's going and what it's paying for. One of the best things that we could do to improve the quality of life for everybody in the country, and particularly those in the lower paid groups, would be to improve the health service so they could get care for any illnesses they've got, so they could get to see a GP. That's the sort of thing that makes a huge difference to your quality of life, not just how much tax you're paying. And it seems to me that when we concentrate to such an extraordinary and irrational degree on the tax rates on the very highest pay, we are ignoring, as you pointed out right in your monologue right at the beginning of the programme, we're ignoring that actually provide by far the bulk of the money that comes in from income tax, by far in this country, and that they are highly taxed. You highly tax them, two things happen.
This is a monologue.
One is...
I will definitely give you your time.
One is that they employ an awful lot of accountants...
flirting, by the way. Just flirting. Edwina, continue.
They employ an awful lot of accountants to find loopholes, which takes money out of the system anyway. And the other is
they're going to do that anyway.
They go and live abroad, right? So you don't get any money from them at all. So in practical terms, never mind morality, in practical terms, what we're doing at the moment, I think, is plain common sense, and I think it will turn out to be that.
Peter.
It's important for everyone watching this to know that the funding for tax cuts delivered this week does not exist. The money does not exist. Kwasi Kwarteng is borrowing more to give a bigger tax cut to people earning the highest amount. The money does not exist. It's as simple as that. Increasing borrowing will be paid by you and you.
So
and
you
me
want a
and...
balanced budget?
No, I didn't say that. No, Edwina.
So you are happy with borrowing?
Come on, you had a 5-minute monologue. I'm asking for 50 seconds. Borrowing is a debt for everyone to pay, even people who are out of work, even people who are poor, certainly NHS patients. I do know about the NHS because Labour invented it. But borrowing is a debt for everyone. So we've borrowed more this week to give a tax cut to the highest earning people. Who would defend that?
Would you be so critical if there were more tax cuts for the people on lower wages?
I think that's a really good question. I think if there were more tax cuts for people on lower wages that were proportionate, that's something Labour would have to be open to. And, you know, I'm not a...
No, if Conservatives had more tax cuts for people on lower wages, because your issue is there's no budget to fund it. But then if the conversation was the other way round, far more cuts for those on lower wages, would you still be having these
Well, there are lots of things I don't like about the budget, of which tax is one. But the other
Peter,
point...
you don't like yes or no very much, do you?
Well, I think the whole budget, as big as yesterday, is a bit more complex than yes and no.
Well, not necessarily. As a simple question. If it was the other way round and the government said, in the mini-budget, we're going to have loads of tax cuts for those on lower wages as opposed to those on higher wages, would you be happy with that, yes or no?
Well, I said yes to that the first time you asked it. But then
where's the budget for that, then? Because you're complaining that Kwasi Kwarteng does not have the money to be able to do the tax cuts for those on higher wages. Where's the money if it was for those on lower wages?
OK, well, what we're going to do, we're going to pick this conversation up. But let me tell you, I've had a lot of emails in the last couple of days. Lots of Conservative supporters that are not liking this budget and are closer to Peter Edwards on this. So is it going to blow up in the government's faces? It is a gamble. We'll discuss more reaction to the budget after the papers at 10:30. But next up, my take at 10. See you shortly.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio
and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know. The latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
It's 10 o'clock and this is Mark Dolan tonight. My Mark Meets guest is the X Factor singer Katie Waissel, talking fame, fortune and working with Simon Cowell. In the news agenda with my panel, does life start at 50? And is the name Gary cool again? Would you name your baby Gary? We'll discuss that later. We've got the Sunday papers at exactly 10:30, and they're full of fascinating stories in relation to the mini budget. And in my take at 10 next, EU Commissioner Ursula von der Leyen says that there are tools available, that's right, tools available, if Italy elects the wrong kind of government. Thank God we're out. I'll see you after the headlines with Rhiannon Jones.
Thank you, Mark. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. The Labour leader's accusing the Chancellor of gambling the mortgages and finances of the British people with what he calls casino economics. Sir Keir Starmer's echoed claims from the Institute of Fiscal Studies, saying Kwasi Kwarteng's mini-budget puts government debt on an unsustainable rising path, something Mr Kwarteng denies. Sir Keir says the government's fiscal plans won't work.
And after 12 long years of Tory failure, didn't they just show their true colours yesterday? Their driving ideology, make the rich richer and do nothing for working people. Well, this conference is our chance to set out the alternative, to make our case, an economy that works for working people, growth for everyone, everywhere, wherever they are, a fairer, greener future.
Well, Chris Philp, Chief Secretary to the Treasury, told us here at GB News the whole country will benefit.
I think the real gamble would be maintaining levels of tax that are inappropriately high, which risk deterring investment, which risk disincentivising hard work, and which risk driving individuals and companies out of the United Kingdom. By having competitive tax rates, we're encouraging people to work, encouraging them to invest, and encouraging people and businesses to locate here in the UK.
The Labour Party's pledged to create a national care service. It claims 13% of care homes need improvement. The party says private equity firms are failing in their duties to residents. Plans for the service include improvements in pay, workers' rights and training. Sir Keir arrived in Liverpool this afternoon and is expected to set out a number of key policies at the party's conference, which starts tomorrow. Elsewhere, Iran's president's cracking down on protesters following more than a week of anti-government demonstrations. It's understood up to 41 people may have been killed since protests broke out over the death of a 22-year-old woman in police custody. Mahsa Amini died after being detained for allegedly breaking headscarf rules. In a show of defiance, men and women around the world are cutting their hair and burning their headscarves. And we're getting our first look tonight at Queen Elizabeth II's final resting place in Windsor. The picture of the Black Ledger Stone has been released by Buckingham Palace. It's been set into the floor of the George VI Memorial Chapel, where the monarch was buried on Monday. The new stone's engraved in gold in memory of the Queen, her parents and her husband, the Duke of Edinburgh. It'll open to the public from next Thursday. TV online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News now. It's back to Mark Dolan tonight.
My thanks to Rhiannon, who returns in an hour's time. Welcome to Mark Dolan tonight. Big stories, big guests, and always big opinions. In the news agenda with my panel, does life start at 50? And is the name Gary cool again? Would you call your baby Gary? How important are children's names? We've got the Sunday papers at exactly 10:30, and reacting to all of the big stories of the day and tomorrow's front pages are my brilliant panel of former government minister, broadcaster and best-selling author. Doesn't she look absolutely gorgeous tonight? Ravishing, Edwina Currie. And the rather handsome, the dashing Peter Edwards, who is a former editor of Labour List, journalist and broadcaster, and the gorgeous political commentator and presenter Lynn May. And the Queen of US Royal reporting, Kinsey Schofield, is live from Hollywood. An exciting new honour for Elton John bestowed upon him by the President, and more revelations about Meghan Markle from an excoriating new royal biography. So that's Kinsey Schofield at 10:20. But first, it's time for my take at 10. The halo has slipped for the EU Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen, and the mask has slipped too. There is now some speculation about what kind of government will be elected in Italy in this weekend's elections, with a right-wing bloc led by Giorgia Meloni expected to win. Now, at first glance, he's not my cup of tea, but hey, that's democracy. But here is the best-dressed autocrat in the world, Ursula von der Leyen, with her rather disturbing view.
We'll see if things go in a difficult direction. I've spoken about Hungary and Poland. We have tools if things go in the right direction. And people, as a body that is always, where always governments have to be accountable to, play an important role.
If things don't go the way we want, we have tools? Sorry, Sebastian and Mark, can you just run that again, please?
We'll see if things go in a difficult direction. I've spoken about Hungary and Poland. We have tools if things go in the right direction. And people, as a body that is always, where always governments have to be accountable to, play an important role.
OK, I've just made notes here. What is a difficult direction in a democracy? A great democracy like Italy. One of the greatest nations on earth, Italy, isn't it? What is the right direction? And what, when it's at home, is a tool? We have the tools to do something. What would that be? Cancel elections in Italy, perhaps, and have an emergency government run from Brussels? Maybe they should close down Italian media and have an information feed directly from the European Parliament. Or perhaps whoever is elected Italy's new Prime Minister should just be bundled into the back of a van and sent to jail without trial. The EU don't think much of democracy, do they? After all, it was a democratic vote in which a majority of Brits chose to leave the EU, a mandate from the British people which the EU fought tooth and nail to reverse. And this is how the bloc have always operated, with many countries, including Ireland and Denmark, having had various referenda about various issues which did not go the EU's way. I guess Ursula would call it a difficult direction. What happened when the EU didn't get the referendum result they wanted? Well, they kept having more referenda until they got the result they did want. I feel sorry for countries like France, Spain, Germany, Portugal and others being run by this pampered and unaccountable elite. Yes, we've got our problems, but if things go badly wrong for Britain, for example, if the tax-cutting budget backfires, we know who to blame. The people have a voice. We have a democracy. With its push for ever closer union, those remaining in the EU are like the handful of prisoners who were unable to run for freedom in the Great Escape, still behind bars, reading the Bible and waiting for their 1 hour of daily exercise. Not only is the EU a deeply undemocratic institution, it's dangerous too. Don't forget it was EU Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen who tried to blockade supplies of the AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine coming to the UK from the continent because they hadn't got their shit together to order enough jabs. They were actually going to sue AstraZeneca so that they could jump the queue, Holly and Phil style, and they were willing to deprive Britain of the medication that we had ordered first. Most egregiously, it was von der Leyen and her commission that threatened to erect a hard border between the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland as part of the dispute. Except the threat of a border between the two countries was always the excuse the EU used for making our lives so hard after Brexit and blocking a trade deal. The EU doesn't believe in nations. It doesn't believe in sovereign states, and it doesn't believe in democracy. Threatening to overturn or tamper with the election result of a great Western democracy like Italy is a new low, but not surprising. Thank God we're out. What's your view? That's actual footage of the Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen saying that if the election result in Italy, of all places, goes in a difficult direction, then they have the tools to do something about it. Would you agree? Thank God we're out. Let me know your thoughts. Mark at gbnews.uk. Let's get the verdict of my all-star panel. Former government minister, broadcaster and best-selling author Edwina Currie, Political commentator and presenter Lynn May and former editor of Labour List, journalist and broadcaster Peter Edwards. Lynn May, what's your thought about this? What was your reaction when you first saw that video? Am I overreacting?
No, I think it's disgusting, to be honest with you. And I just have to remind people, for all those that are wavering in them voting for Brexit, which I did, this is one of the huge reasons. They shouldn't be able to meddle in our affairs like they're trying to do in Italy's. And who knows where it will stop. And even though people are slightly fractious about where's Brexit going and maybe it wasn't the best deal, the point is, when you get divorced, it's never nice at the beginning, is it? But then afterwards, you see the light. So I'm happy that we Brexited.
For sure. Peter, what's your thought about the undertones of this statement? And as Lynn May said, where this actually goes?
Well, I'm not sure there are any undertones. It was a statement of economic and legal facts. And I think as a Brexiteer, Mark, having won the referendum, you shouldn't be so paranoid, feeling that the wicked Europhiles are out to get you. Ursula von der Leyen, in a very understated manner, and I'm not particularly a fan of hers, but what she said was entirely reasonable. There are economic and budget deficit rules in the Eurozone, and Italy is part of the Eurozone, and there are European laws and precedent that, for example, ensure human rights and proper treatment of people in minorities, gay, lesbian and transgender people. And I think she was making economic and legal points that are perhaps not fascinating, but the EU does have levers to pull in terms of if its member states step out of line in terms of either economic pacts or the law. So that's why I think you're making a bit of a mountain out of a molehill.
Do you think she was considering minorities? Sorry to interrupt. I just have to ask, Peter, do you think she was really considering minority groups when she said that statement?
Well, I think she was talking about economic rules of the Eurozone and the law, basic human rights in EU members. So, yeah.
Peter Edwards, I hate to spoil the party and prick your balloon, but I voted Remain in 2016. But when I see a video like this, I'm so glad that I was in the minority of those voting to get out. I was also very grateful that we were out during the vaccine rollout when von der Leyen herself threatened to erect a border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. The behaviour of the EU post-Brexit has been a disgrace. And if there was a referendum now, I would absolutely all day long vote for Brexit. So let me clarify that point. I've got buyer's regret as a Remainer. But in the end, it's the optics of this, Peter, isn't it? Of a supernatural organisation like the EU dictating to a great democracy like Italy.
Mark, I mean, we disagree on one or two things, maybe slightly more than that. I would never call you naive, ever. I think it's entirely realistic that having Brexited, the EU takes quite a tough approach on Britain to deter other countries from doing the same. And I think that is just realpolitik.
OK, Edwina.
Well, I wonder exactly what she's thinking of, because it doesn't seem to apply, for example, to Hungary right now, which has taken a totally different view from the rest of the EU in trying to fight Putin's Russia and refusing to accept deliveries of gas and oil. So it doesn't seem to work when push comes to shove like that. And I'm minded that actually Ursula von der Leyen was a minor politician, not anywhere near the very senior levels, in Germany at a time that the Nord Stream gas pipelines were built, and they were more than friendly with Russia and thought they were going to be really reliable deliverers of absolutely essential stuff like gas and oil. So, you know, people in that position need to, I would say, choose their words more carefully. They are working with democracies. And I was like you, Mark. I campaigned for Remain and I voted for Remain in 2016. But I understand why millions of people in this country took a different view. And it is statements like the ones that you have just highlighted, the feeling that we were going to have to do, we were being told what to do by a group of people who weren't elected and that have been very minor politicians in countries that we didn't always have the greatest respect for, who were trying to tell us what to do and who were being given the international powers and the powers by our own parliament to enable that to happen.
Edwina, there are a lot of minor politicians who have a role in public debate, but what I'd ask...
I'm one of them, and we often talk a lot of sense, but that's why I say that Ursula has to choose her words with more tact, more grace.
This is what I want to ask you and Mark. What is wrong specifically of what she said? If you join a club, you have to abide by the rules of a club. We're not in that club anymore. Why are you both upset with her comments?
Because you take part in making the rules. Sometimes you don't take part in the making of the rules. Sometimes a lot of these rules now are made on majority voting. Sometimes she just decides how she's going to apply those rules. What she can't do is say, look, there's an election going on, or election has gone on, and we don't like the outcome and we don't like the policies, and we're going to decide.
Italy keeps voting in Europhile leaders, therefore the Italian people accept being part of the EU.
We'll pick up this conversation. It clearly is a heated debate. Yes or no, Edwina Currie, if there was a referendum on European membership now, would you vote to go back in?
Oh, absolutely not. But I would want us to be close friends and really good trading partners with them. Customers.
Edwina would not vote for EU membership. She voted Remain. She would not vote Remain today. Fascinating stuff, a journey that I've been on too. Well done, all you Brexiteers. Hashtag right side of history. It's time now for this. It's time now for Mark Meets, in which I speak to the biggest names in the world of politics, sport, showbiz and beyond. Tonight, the brilliantly talented singer and songwriter Katie Waissel, who won the public's heart in the 7th series of X Factor. Let's have a listen to Katie in action.
So give me the secret mankind, tell me what to do. Give me the power of man's red flower so I can be like you. Oh, who be do? I want to be like you. I want to walk like you, talk like you too. You see it's true, someone like me can't let to be like someone like you.
Absolutely brilliant performance. Following her success on the show, there followed the release of her self-titled debut album, which won rave reviews. And following that, another stint on reality TV, and this time Celebrity Big Brother, alongside Christopher Biggins and Samantha Fox. Plus, she was an earlier pioneer of YouTube and Facebook, starring in the innovative online reality show Green-Eyed World, which charted her quest to get a record deal. Well, she got that deal, and the rest is history. And I'm delighted to say that Katie Waissel joins me now. Hi, Katie.
Hi. Oh my gosh. Thank you for just the most wonderful introduction. I can't believe that you even mentioned about the Green-Eyed World, which I hold so dear to my heart, which was prior to that show. I just want to say I was so also blown away by what Edwina Currie was saying just now. And I really appreciated that. So as you know, somebody that's just finished law school and understands public law, I was really actually moved by what she was saying, and I understand where she was coming from. So that's
really
X Factor.
That's really interesting. Did you felt that Edwina was right to say that Ursula von der Leyen must frame her language very carefully as the leader of the EU Commission in relation to national elections?
I think that everybody as a whole should frame their language, with a different, I guess, approach and understanding. We live in a very transparent world these days where, people are so connected globally with online channels that they create, but and rightly so, people are giving the voices a voice, and you can't hide behind a ministerial code anymore. The truth comes out. Do you know what I'm saying? So there is a way that, rightly or wrongly, whatever this person's intent is, there is a way to handle it, which is respectable and kind, and for the future generations. Otherwise, they're just going to end up archaic and Jurassic like the law itself. But that's just me.
I think you're absolutely right about that, and I think that it's just bad politics, really, isn't it? Well, look, you are a lawyer now. Congratulations. You've had lots of careers. You were an innovator on online sort of streaming and YouTube and Facebook, all of that. You are a very talented songwriter and singer. You got your break on The X Factor. Did it change your life, Katie, for the better or the worse?
Oh my gosh. Well, I just want to make a couple of amendments to that narrative, is that I didn't get my break on The X Factor. If anything, it was unfortunately and very sadly something that was quite destructive, and that's putting it politely. So I speak as much as I can, in a way that I can, about my experience on there, uncovering and rediscovering information. Now that I understand contract law, I'm able to relook through things and decipher what was really absolutely beyond imaginably unacceptable, and the mistreatment of and lack of duty of care to not only myself, but there were minors on the show at the time. So in relation to your question, whether it was a making or breaking of me, I guess 12 and a bit years on, I'd like to think that I'm turning poison into medicine now with all that we are campaigning for and fighting for.
I mean, are you able to elaborate? Katie, if you're comfortable, are you able to elaborate on the negatives of your experience, or the poison, as you refer to it as?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's taken me quite some time to get to a point where I speak about it comfortably. I will never speak about it comfortably, but basically there was so much coercion, manipulation, things that happened that, you know, I can only but speak for myself, and I'll just say that off the bat. But, you know, when faced with such fear of the outside world, when, you know, you would only but, I guess, be told to trust the people that were around you, and then later on understand that that wasn't the absolute case at all. So I know I'm talking a bit in riddles here. Basically, I never wanted to go on the show in the first place. I didn't. And I really am so apprehensive about really disclosing it, but I'm telling myself in the back of my mind, no, just speak on it. It's okay. I didn't want to go on the show in the first place. As you said, I did the show with the Coca-Cola company, and this was prior to the X Factor, and I was very proud of the immense hard work and efforts I'd put into my promising, I guess, career as a singer and a songwriter since I was 17. So when I had filed my police report for something, I tugged at a string that unraveled quite a lot. That I really wasn't even expecting to unravel, but it just unveiled a lot of manipulation and coercion and illegality, to be very frank.
It does sound absolutely appalling. My heart goes out to you, and I hope that you're able to you know, amplify this message about how you were treated, so others don't suffer the same fate. Briefly, Katie, and I apologise because the clock's against us, but do you think it still goes on these singing shows? And would you discourage a young star like you were back in the day to now do them?
I'll never discourage anybody to follow their dreams and follow their heart. What I encourage is, and I'm pleading with the government right now, is for education in schools, on TikTok, social media platforms, to at least provide the fundamental tools, like my charity, the Owl Foundation, is doing currently with One Direction fans and people that formerly worked on the show, is educating people about the rights and wrongs, what to look out for from a legal standpoint, how important mental health support is, and things like this. So I would never discourage anybody from following their dreams. It just needs to be done in the right way. And I think that the first port of call is legislation.
Yeah, and they need to be safe, and they need that duty of care that you did not receive very clearly, Katie. I want to congratulate you because you have started a career as a lawyer now. You're a mummy as well. You look incredible. You're still a great singer and songwriter. So will you come and see us in the studio soon?
I would love nothing more, honestly. Thank you for being so accommodating, and as a single mum to a 4-year-old, so it's a bit tough to juggle, but thank you, and I would love to come in studio soon.
Well, we can't wait. And bring Baba with you, because producer Mark will look after your little baby. Don't worry. He's got a very good. He's got a good manner.
And everything else that you
Brilliant stuff. Well, look, Katie Waissel, thank you so much for joining us. X Factor star now, lawyer, mum, songwriter, you name it. She's been through a lot, and I think it was very courageous for her to come on this show and be so honest about what she went through, which it's very clear was deeply, deeply traumatic. Lots to get through. We've got the papers next and Kinsey Schofield. So we'll see you in 2 Shakes of a Lamb's Tail. Papers next and Kinsey. And don't forget, you can email the show, and it's going to be mark@gbnews.uk, of course, for all of your feedback across the board and a comprehensive look at tomorrow's headlines. We're printing out the front pages, and let me tell you, there's some explosive stuff out there. And with Kinsey, we'll be talking about a surprise gong for Sir Elton John in the United States. Well, look, let's go straight to America. Kinsey is here, and she joins us for Showbiz News. Kinsey, how are we?
Look at you dancing, Mark. I love it.
Dancing around, improvising on live telly. Now, Kinsey, it's great to see you. And I want to ask you about, a new book by Valentine Lowe, who's a highly respected royal journalist, who's written a book about the royal family. And it doesn't make good reading for one Meghan Markle.
No, Mark. This is what I would say is probably the worst reflection of Meghan that I have read so far. I know we both loved Tom Bower's book, and Tom Bower talked in his book about how Meghan was so kind to her Suits cast and production team. Now, in Valentine Lowe's book, you are seeing a completely different character. I think that Meghan is, as she becomes the Duchess of Sussex and as she gets into this relationship with Prince Harry, you really see her insecurities start to come out, and she is overcompensating for the fact that she maybe doesn't feel like she belongs. So many episodes of cruelty documented throughout this book. We even heard, shockingly, someone overheard Meghan say that she thought she should be paid. She could not believe she was not paid for her position in the royal family. Very unappealing story about Prince Harry walking back to the press pack and saying, thanks for coming, even though you weren't invited. They're referred to as teenagers, though they're the way that they behave and the way that they feed off of each other. Some of their employees referred to them as teenagers, and they rallied together and created a group called the Sussex Survivors Club. So a lot of it, I also wanted to say really quickly, just to give Valentine Lowe some credibility here, which he does not need from me. But I heard in February, so these are some direct quotes from my sources, that Meghan was overly harsh to the staff inside Kensington Palace, cross with the servants is another quote that I received, and occasionally shouted at them. So I just think that this maybe was something that we were whispering about for a long time, but did not really have the guts to say until Meghan started making some pretty harsh accusations on Oprah Winfrey.
Yes. Kinsey, is it my impression that during the course of the very sad occasion of the Queen's funeral, there was zero progress made between the Sussexes and the firm? This couple are now back in California and back to square one, because I don't see a difference in relations between the two families. Do you?
Yeah, it's my understanding that while everybody was just sucking it up for the circumstances, they wanted to do the best for the Queen. But reality is not a lot of progress was made. The Sussexes, the time they spent with the family, we saw most of it. We saw the majority of it. It was on camera, and it was throughout these ceremonies. I just think that Meghan and Harry, since they've gotten home, they've had a completely new PR blitz. Hearst magazine all tweeting out these same glowing articles about Meghan's charity involvement, which is lacking, by the way. And then I think we also need to get prepared, because I'm not seeing anybody talk about this, but Samantha Markle, her lawsuit with Meghan, we're going to see it at the beginning of October. They're supposed to actually go to court. So a lot going on with Harry and Meghan back in the States. Variety magazine cover, podcasts are going to start coming out again soon regularly. And then we've got Samantha Markle's lawsuit to look forward to.
Kinsey, finally, before we let you go, apologies for the truncated chat today. A very, very busy show. But big news for a British music superstar. Elton John, surprised by the President Joe Biden.
That's right. He cried when he got his medal on Friday. He performed for about 2,000 people on the White House lawn. This was the people in the audience are, hospital workers and LGBTQ campaigners. So this was a humanitarian medal that he received. Actually, Elton John's very important to Joe Biden. He used to sing Crocodile Rock to his son, Beau, as a child. And again, as Beau was dying of cancer, Joe Biden said he used to sing that song to Beau. So, I think that this was a really beautiful scene, actually, to get to witness.
It really is wonderful. The Rocket Man does it again. Kinsey, brilliant stuff. Great to see you back at home, safe and sound in the United States, and we'll catch you in a week's time.
Thank you, sir.
The Queen of US Showbiz, Royal and Political Reporting, Kinsey Schofield. Well, the papers are in. They're hot off the press, and we'll react to them with my panel in 2 minutes.
We are GB News. And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England,
Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio,
And online.
we're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's
News channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know. The latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back to Mark Dolan tonight. It is just gone 10:30. At this time every Friday, Saturday and Sunday, we have the papers. And, of course, we'll have a full panel reaction from Edwina Currie and Peter Edwards and Lynn May. Let's start, shall we, with The Telegraph. And here's their front page. Take a look at this. Truss plans to cut taxes again in the new year. And Peter Edwards spits out his tea. Reforms to income tax, savings and child benefits considered to boost economy. Liz Truss is planning to continue her tax-cutting spree in a new year budget that will include further reductions in income tax and discounts for savers and child benefit claimants. Treasury officials are drawing up a list of pinch points that discourage employees from making more money by imposing high rates of tax on extra earnings as part of a wholesale review of Britain's tax system. Up to 1.6 million savers could benefit from a review of the lifetime and annual allowances on pension pots, which can encourage employees to take early retirement to avoid the tax trap. Workers who earn more than £100,000 would be given a full income tax personal allowance under plans that amounts to a tax break worth up to £5,000 a year for top earners. Military numbers will grow for the first time since the Cold War in £52 billion spending boost. And London set for influx of bankers from New York and Edinburgh. OK, let's go to the Sunday Times now. Riddle, as PM's chief of staff, is paid through his lobbying company and trusts his plans for more migrants to boost growth. Liz Truss is facing her first cabinet row as she prepares to increase immigration to boost economic output. The PM is pushing for wide-ranging reform of Britain's visa system to tackle acute labour shortages from around the world. Sunday Express now. Chancellor, you ain't seen nothing yet. Kwasi Kwarteng yesterday heralded his £45 billion tax giveaway as just the start of a true blue Tory revolution. Barely 24 hours after announcing the biggest tax cuts in 50 years, he declared, "We're not stopping there, we're just getting started." Of course, those set of comments backed up by the front page of The Telegraph. The Observer next. Starmer unveils green growth plan to counter Truss tax cuts. Of course, tomorrow sees the start of Labour Party conference, and we'll have a conference special tomorrow night from 9. Keir Starmer today, and of course that in relation to tomorrow's papers, so he will pledge tomorrow to deliver a new era of economic growth and permanently lower energy bills by turning the UK into an independent green superpower before 2030 through a massive expansion of wind and solar energy. Announcing details of the plan exclusively to The Observer, the Labour leader says he will double the amount of onshore wind, triple solar and more than quadruple offshore wind power, re-industrialising the country to create a net zero, carbon, self-sufficient electricity system by the end of this decade. Meanwhile, Chancellor risks red wall votes, say Tory MPs, as a response to his tax-cutting budget. The Independent. Iran vows crackdown as protests grow. Demonstrations spread to the UK, Germany and Iraq following the death in Tehran of Mahsa Amini. Budget tax breaks will go to affluent Tory areas, is the front page of The Independent from their deputy political editor, Rob Merrick. Labour claims giveaways will damage poorer parts of the country. The Daily Mirror, footy legends fears. Harry, my Sandra's COVID hell. Wife was seriously ill after catching virus. And last but not least, the Daily Star Sunday. Green-eyed monster. A woman planning to marry the ghost who seduced her says the only problem with her Victorian soldier lover is that he's dead jealous and nicks her pants. I think a lot of men do that. And those are your front pages. OK, well, look, it seems, doesn't it, Peter Edwards, that this government are committing to their growth strategy and their low-tax agenda, with the Telegraph predicting more tax cuts in 2023.
Well, I think there will be tax cuts. There's a question, of course, about who they benefit, but I think the Tories have got what they wanted, which is clear dividing lines with the Labour Party. I've always felt there have been, but they're clearer than ever now on the basis on which the next election is going to be fought. And I think we've got a couple of things going on this week which are reflected in the papers. We've got sticking plasters for cost of living, energy and the evil acts of Vladimir Putin and the impact on energy. But then you've also got the run-in to the next election, and Liz Truss knows that she doesn't have very long at all. And, of course, the thing about budgets is there's a time lag. So whether you agree with the measures or not, some of the times they're not felt for a year later. So I think Liz Truss, and it was a quote from one of her advisors in the paper this week, is in a race to turn 2 years into 7 years. So I think this breakneck pace of announcements will continue. But, of course, I think it's fair to say of any party that if you hurry stuff that is reliant on vast amounts of economic data, you might get it wrong.
But as a Labour supporter, if these tax cuts are such a bad idea, you're laughing, aren't you? You've won the next election already.
Well, I think Labour have got to be anything but complacent. Now, I worked for a Labour shadow cabinet minister when Ed Miliband frequently had an opinion poll lead of well over 10%, and I liked him a lot, and I thought Ed Miliband would have been a really good social democratic prime minister, but we were behind, we being Labour, we were behind on the economy. Ed Miliband was behind on leadership. So I think many of us had this sneaking fear that the closer it got to polling day, David Cameron would creep up and up and up, and then they had a very negative campaign, but it worked. The Tories won fair and square, and I think Labour's got to learn quite a painful lesson from that it does come down to economics and leadership. And while I absolutely do think that the mini-budget was unfair and benefited the elites, as we were saying earlier, that won't wash on the doorstep. You need a message about leadership, and you need a message about, are you better off than you were 3 or 4 years ago to win? And Liz Truss, may well blow it up, but if there's any sign of that, there might be yet another Tory leadership contest.
Isn't this budget a gift for Labour, at least in terms of headlines? Because, I stand by the principle that I think going for growth is the way to go. You borrow for tax cuts, which shortens the recession, and in the end you get that money back, hopefully, and then a growing economy can lift everyone, pay for the NHS, etc. But the headlines from the budget could be bankers' bonuses, unlimited, and tax cuts for the rich. That's going to be great news on the doorstep for Labour, isn't it?
It should be, yeah, and it's not just tax cuts for senior bankers, but it's tax cuts for senior bankers at a time there's a cost of living crisis. But my view is that's all well and good as a political argument, but Labour still needs more on top. And I think the one bit of advice I give, and I'm very happy with Keir Starmer's leadership. I think he's very sensible, and I think he's...
You're looking for a job?
Focused on the whole economy. I doubt they'd want me, and I'm always happy chatting to you, Mark.
Head of media?
I'm always happy chatting to you.
You'd be the new Alistair Campbell. I think you'd be much better than him. You're much cleverer.
I think many people would disagree with that, not least Alistair. No, I'm English, so I've always got a pink face.
You're less of a bully as well. Honestly, that man is a
but anyway, to finish that point, I think Keir Starmer's doing very well, but I also think what he's got to do this week is introduce the shadow cabinet of the country, because when Labour wins, it's on having a broad pool of talent. Cast your mind back 25-odd years, not just Blair, but Brown, Mo Mowlam, Robin Cook, senior figures, a lot of experience, Mandelson behind the scenes doing the media. Let's make the best of the shadow cabinet, give them a platform this week.
Well, I thought New Labour were quite good. They kept taxes very low, didn't they? 40% top rate, and very aspirational, Tony Blair. New Labour, of course, but a distant memory under this new leadership of Keir Starmer. Do you think that this is a sort of open goal for him, Lynn May, just the idea of bankers' bonuses and tax cuts for the rich?
Well, I thought it would be, but it seems that they're leading on green growth. And if we look at the current climate now, and if they're the party that's supposedly for, the working class, the average person, the normal man, I don't think they should be leading on, a green plan, because if we're honest, do we really care about, green plans? Because that means more taxes, green taxes. And I think people want to know how they're going to feed themselves as opposed to the future of green plans.
But Lynn, briefly, I think it's about expanding the pool of energy because none of us, left or right, want to be on the hook to Vladimir Putin. So it's about expanding the pool. There aren't any more fossil fuels. We know we're running out. So then going to renewables to give Britain more energy independence seems fairly sensible, given what's going on in Eastern Europe.
He doesn't mention nuclear, so he's not being realistic at all.
Well, having been to Labour conference a lot, if you pitch up on day one of Labour conference and say, let's build a lot more nuclear power stations, that's a pretty tough sell to the comrades.
That's the problem that Labour faces. And in a way, Keir Starmer, the guy on the front page of The Observer, is one of Lynn Truss's best assets, because he's only going to try and find middle-of-the-way, non-insulting, non-controversial stuff, and it doesn't add up to a hill of beans. Where I live up in the High Peak, this last week, we had the resignation of 2 Labour councillors, not only from the council, but from the Labour Party as well. Why? Because they're not going to sing God Save the King at the Labour Party conference. They are still grieving for Jeremy Corbyn, right? And a large number of the people who were fighting for Labour last time are of that ilk. So Keir Starmer, nice man that he is going to stand up in the Labour Party conference and say virtually nothing. Now, what we have to do on the Conservative side, we really have to improve our PR. We have to have people half my age on programmes like this talking sense.
And explaining the tax cuts.
Explaining why. Kwasi Kwarteng, I thought, did a good job of this when he was talking, but he had so little time and so much to do. Yes. He really needs to have some rather stronger support that's going out there. And he needs support from our previous prime ministers, all of them.
Good luck with that.
Yeah, well, quite.
Lynn, it's interesting that you mentioned the green policies as outlined by Keir Starmer. We'll be focusing on Labour tomorrow in our conference special. But Starmer unveils green growth plan to counter Truss tax cuts. I mean, this is a gamble, isn't it? It will play well with sort of Labour grassroots. But Germany invested £500 billion in renewables over the last decade, and they face a winter fuel crisis because they're still reliant on Russian gas. And so the issue is that we all want to go green, don't we, eventually, right? Clean up the planet, bring down carbon emissions. But renewables are unreliable and expensive. And therefore, I would argue, in the short to medium term, you need a mix. And I'm not sure this message of go green is going to wash well.
And anything that they do now, it's not going to be something that people are going to benefit from in the next year to 2 years. And that's what people are going to be looking at when they go to the polls. What are you doing for our standard of living? What are you doing to help us have more money in our pocket? And to be honest with you, I know this has been said before, but talking about green growth is fairly middle-class Islington.
Oh, Lynn, I'm not sure if that's quite fair. Surely one of the lessons of the energy and the cost of living crisis, these things don't come out of nowhere. The cost of living crisis isn't just like the weather. It materialises from poor government decisions, whereas it's Theresa May reducing the gas reserves or Britain not building enough homes, forcing up rents and mortgages. Labour or any party of government are completely right to plan for 10 or 20 years hence.
No, I understand that.
I think we both accept that.
Yeah.
The problem is now, and one of the best ways, and I hate saying this because I'm anti-inflation, but one of the best ways of ensuring that you actually support the standard of living of millions and millions of households is cutting taxes. Right? And Labour is stuck because they were very hostile to some of the increases, such as the increase in the national insurance.
But Labour's just won that argument.
And they have just won that argument, and they can't say so because they have to oppose it.
No, Labour are the opposite of stuck. They said, don't go ahead with the Nix rise, the government U-turned. Labour won that argument, and one can debate Keir Starmer's other policies, but to say Labour are stuck when they've won the argument is the opposite of the truth.
Then why has he got this
That
as his
shouldn't be
headline?
his main
It's a
headline.
good policy.
There you go. Sparks again are flying. My goodness, you could get energy from this lot, couldn't you? We could warm a village with the heat of their debate. Lots more to come from the papers. Also, does life start at 50? And is the name Gary making a comeback? And, of course, lots more on Labour. Their conference starts tomorrow. And also, how about this? London set for influx of bankers from New York and Edinburgh. The tax cuts are working already. See you in 2.
We are GB News. And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio,
And online.
we're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's
News channel.
On the Mark Stein Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Stein Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know. The latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
OK, well, look, a word of warning from Jackie in relation to a possible Labour government. We'll be talking about Labour tomorrow because their conference starts tomorrow afternoon. This from Jackie, who says, be careful what you wish for by voting for a socialist government. The left-wing Social Democrats are ruling America, and what goes on there often comes here. With socialism, you become reliant on the state for your way of life. They end up controlling you. Great programme, says Jackie. Jackie, thank you so much for that. Greg says, in regards to Starmer and the Green agenda, let's have a look. He says, I'm having trouble reading this, but it says, I'd like to... he just lists my support for his plans, Keir Starmer, because to date, what he wants to do will take away too much farmland and won't be able to be self-sufficient for healthy fruits and vegetables. Plus, the Green agenda is really having an impact on manufacturing. So I think that's words of concern from Greg there in relation to Starmer's plans for the environment. A very kind email from Lee, who says, Dear Mark, I adore GB News. The presenters are amazing. I love all the topics, guests, everything's spot on. Such an amazing channel. In fact, the only decent channel on TV these days. Mark, you're simply delightful and set exactly the right tone. Well done to all involved. What a breath of fresh air. I can't believe I'm enjoying watching the media in 2022. Well, look, you go on to be very, very kind about it.
There's no but after that.
There's no but. There should be. Normally there is. Well, Lee, thank you for your kind words. We are nothing without you. So if you're enjoying the show and enjoying the channel, tell your friends, tell your family, and let's change the world together. Lots more from the papers, but can I just bring you the results of our text poll? Earlier in the programme, we put out a tweet and we asked, are tax cuts for the rich immoral? 51.5% said yes and 48.5% said no, and that was across 6,500 votes. Another story that caught our eye from the papers, Gwyneth Paltrow shares advice on her website Goop about turning 50, which includes owning her body and deepening her relationship with her husband. Now, I know not all of my panel have turned 50 yet, but let's see what they think. Does life start at 50? Perhaps, Edwina, I could start with you because I believe you're 51.
I will be 76 next month.
It's incredible. You look amazing.
So Gwyneth Paltrow is talking a load of gobbledygook, so ignore her. But I was very lucky because I lost my seat when I was 50. And that sounds bizarre to say. I mean, I was expecting it. Once Tony Blair got elected as leader of the Labour Party, he just kind of swept everything before him. And I knew my seat was going to go.
Was it 97?
97.
97, yeah.
And I looked at him and I thought, do you know what? I'm going to be a pensioner before we get back. It's turned out to be true. I have to do something else. And at that age, it's a wonderful opportunity. You are young enough to make a go of things, and you are old enough to have the wisdom that you can start to apply to whatever you're doing. So I would say if you're coming up to 50 and you are not sure whether to change tack or not, go for it. Go for it. And you will have all the benefit of what you've learned up to that point, and you will then have the excitement and the incentive and the really making something new out of what you're about to do.
You were an
and you're going to be working to 70 anyway these days.
You were a fearless, combative, hard-working and talented minister and one of the most high-profile politicians of your generation. You managed to steal a bit of limelight from Thatcher, which was almost impossible to do. You got out of Parliament, you became a best-selling author, you published your diaries and then some rather exciting thrillers set in Parliament. And you had a very successful show on 5 Live, a weekend phone-in, actually, I think, in this slot.
That's right.
And how long did you do that for?
About 5 years.
That was brilliant.
Until the Iraq War, when I felt the BBC was, at that time, beginning to back the narrative of the government, and I didn't think that was our job. So I didn't fall out with anybody. I didn't have any rows, but there came a point at which I thought, I'm not going to do this anymore. I've done it for 5 years. I'm going to do something else. And I went off and did other things.
Well, it was a show I listened to every night when I was coming home from my comedy gigs.
Dear boy.
Not at all, far from it. And it was a definitive bit of broadcasting. So there you go. So it's never too late, and life starts at any age, doesn't it?
Well, I think whatever opportunities you face, and people have had huge churn in their lives in the last couple of years, if you're thinking of doing something different, I would say go for it. Take advantage of the opportunity. Don't worry too much if you don't succeed. You learn from that. But if you never change, you will always have regrets about never having tried something new.
Very inspirational. I think you've got another book in you, and I think it's a self-help book. Edwina Curry changes your life. Can we now just talk about the name Gary before we go? Because this is a story from the papers in Metro. A list has revealed what the most popular baby names are for 2022. Ian and Paul were two quite surprising entries, and Gary has made a comeback. So what do we think? Is Gary cool again? What do you think, Lynn May?
I'm so sorry to all of the Garys, but I just don't think Gary's a very sexy name. So...
Would you date a Gary?
I mean, he would have to be 10-10.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. When you look at... I was saying this to the others outside. When you look at a baby, oh, I'm going to call my baby Gary, it's just a bit flat. Again, no offence, I'm sure there's some lovely Garys out there.
Well, let's have a look at some of the greatest Garys in history. Are you ready for that? There you go. So we've got Gary Lineker. Is he a 10 out of 10?
No.
Not having it. He's a bit woke, isn't he? How about our Gary Barlow?
Wet.
Gary Barlow?
Not bad, not bad.
Potentially. Talented songwriter. We've got Gary Cooper, famous actor.
Oh, yes, please.
Handsome devil, look at that.
He is good looking, yeah.
OK, and we've got another Gary. Gary Neville, footballer. What do we think? A good talker?
Oh, no.
Great left foot?
I fight with him on Twitter
do you
all
really?
the time. I
yes,
do.
He's quite stubborn, isn't he? He's a bit tenacious.
Gary Lineker and Gary Neville.
Any other
Same
Garys?
pod.
Gary Oldman, brilliant actor. I interviewed him in Hollywood, a really nice guy, great sense of humour.
Quirky, quite quirky.
Any other Garys in the back of the cupboard for me, Sebastian? Gary Glitter?
Oh, no.
OK, well, I think the less said on that, the better.
Yeah. But did you know that...
The end of the show couldn't come soon enough, could it?
One of the least popular names now is Nigel. And everybody I know is called Nigel.
Oh, I can see why.
Well, I'd like to have another son just so I can call him Nigel. Peter, that served you well. What a lovely name.
Well, Peter, I guess, although I didn't choose it, has kind of endured through the ages. I'd stand up for Gary's. I've worked with a few nice ones, but...
Peter has stood up for 2,000 years.
The rock upon which the church was
that would do
founded.
it. But you know what Peter's going to be calling his next son? Keir. And we'll be talking about Keir Starmer tomorrow in our Labour conference special. My thanks to Lynn, Peter and Edwina, and most importantly to you for your company. It's been a joy. Stick around for headliners at 11, and I'll see you tomorrow at 9 for a very special show.
Looking ahead to tomorrow's weather, and the UK's looking chilly but sunny at first, turning cloudier and windier in the far north. Let's take a look at the details. Starting off across Scotland, and by 7 a.m. the cloud will have started to spill in from the north, and winds will strengthen too before a spell of rain arrives later. Whilst it'll be mostly fine across much of Northern Ireland tomorrow morning, there'll be a little showery rain perhaps before turning wetter as we head through the afternoon. Clear skies overnight mean it'll be a chilly start across much of northern England. After a sunny morning, things will turn cloudier here later. It's a similar story across much of Wales, so a chilly but sunny start for many here, the exception being towards the coast where the odd showers possible with more cloud. A dry and clear start across the Midlands. Here it'll be chilly at first, though probably not cold enough for any frost, warming up in the sunshine as we head through the morning.